This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man
is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
WESN.
Welcome one and all. This is Talking Point from the Sister Isle. Let me make a quick adjustment there. Very well, it started off as a not so beautiful morning as I got into the car to come to the office. Not in Trinidad, still in Tobago. However, I had the interesting scenario of seeing on one side of the sky, literally, I was right in the middle, were very dark clouds and thunder, and on the other side was lit up by the rising sun. I'll wait to see exactly how this day is going to be with regards to the weather. Hopefully it's not going to be too bad at the end of the day. We live in a country where bad weather is not necessarily something that we could take for granted. We will not suffer any losses through. And maybe there was a time when rain was just rain, but right now rain could either be something that's welcome to cool us down or an unfortunate situation for some to flood us out. And who gets flooded out is at the mercy of the town and country gods. I don't know. The lack of planning, the lack of drainage. And one of the things that makes life interesting is we have all of these challenges, but there is a piece in the Newsday yesterday that laments the fact that, well, this is the headline anyway. Socioeconomic conditions that triggered attempted coup still persist 35 years later. And we went through, what, an oil boom? Tides changed with oil money after that period that the NAR were trying to shepherd us through some hard times. The foreign exchange situation improved. Foreign products were back on the shelves in a big way. It's weird to me to see strawberries so readily available when I remember that was a thing that was not on supermarket shelves when I was growing up. And after the oil boom or the oil recovery of our nation, we then had the natural gas boom. So we had periods of significant economic wealth from, you could argue, depending on how you look at it, two sources, one oil, one natural gas. And now, 35 years later, this article is basically implying or hinting or revealing that we are almost back where we started. I have lived in a time period where I literally saw my country's economy literally start here, grow, and then decline. But the problem is the growth and decline wasn't just the a normal recession cycle where you have growth and then recession, growth and recession, based on economic activity and human behavior, human psychology, and international conditions. No, it was primarily based on our extraction of fossil fuels and our inability to manage the wealth that came from it for the long-term benefit of the country. What does that say about us? There's going to be a lot of talk about the coup and what happened with the coup and what should have been done about the coup. And I don't know how much of that is really going to have the true purpose of consequences for the coup. Now, I believe there was another article that lamented the reason why crime is what it is now is that what were the consequences for those that did the coup, that participated, that planned, that implemented, that were part of the violence, directly and indirectly? What consequences did they face? And as a nation, did we see people take such drastic action be held to account? And that is where, in my opinion, we need to spend more time on. I understand, yes, memorials and never forgetting those who died, that's important, never forgetting the violence. But one of the reasons why we never forget is to memorialize the dead. But even if there was not dead, there's still the other reason, and that is so that history would not repeat itself, that we would not repeat the mistakes of the past. One of those mistakes is the specifics of managing the country during those times. I didn't just say managing the socioeconomics of the country. I said managing the country, both managing the financials as well as managing the population's expectations. Actually dealing with the dollars and cents and trying to ensure that we are not in the red, as well as giving the population enough transparency, accountability, and realistic expectations so that when they look at the situation, one, they're not going to have pie in the sky demands and get upset because it's not been there. And two, accountability and transparency so that they can trust. There can be no doubts. Because once you're in hard times, you're going to be in situations where people aren't going to like it, and it's a lot easier for them to doubt you then. Because notice, when there was a lot of trust, arguably, there was a lot of trust at times within the last 35 years. But why is it that if we trusted our leaders more often than not within the last 35 years, why is it now that we could have a headline that says the conditions that triggered the coup in 1990 still persist 35 years later? We need that accountability. We need that. Now, case in point, Minister of Defense Wayne Sturge said that the Civilian Conservation Corps has not been shut down. He pointed to the fact that it's approximately $2.5 million monthly to keep the program running. However, they're going to end about half of the employees' contracts. Why? Because there's no new intake coming in for the next few months. The next intake is carded for January 2026. And there hasn't been an intake since January of this year. Or if there was supposed to be an intake in January, it did not happen. Since January, they are paying $2.5 million monthly to keep a program running that isn't actually doing anything because they didn't have any students to actually participate in it. And it's easy for $2.5 million a month to go unnoticed when your annual budget is in the realm of $55 to $60 billion. It is easy. We do not have a robust and independent enough media industry in order to ensure deep dive investigative journalism on everything. It's not large enough, and to some extent, corporate concerns will undermine independent journalism in various ways, directly and indirectly. Corporate concerns and to some extent political concerns. But more importantly, even if you had a great journalism industry, a great environment of news reporting and investigative journalism, $2.5 million a month in a program that on the surface appears to be important, you know, unless somebody kind of sees the clues and reads the tea leaves, it's easy for that to go unnoticed. The question is, how many situations exist like this? One of my concerns is by ending the contract of 72 employees, depending on whose contract is ended and whose contract is not, what is the risk of losing valuable institutional knowledge? Now, it's better than ending the contract of everybody. But then, and this is the catch-22, then we're essentially paying people just to keep the lights on so that it could be ready, hopefully, come next January to hit the ground running. Because if you ended the contracts of everybody, you run the risk that the program will fall apart. Things like this has happened before when you want to play fast and loose with when you figure out the only consideration is accounting, you want to play fast and loose with institutional knowledge and the skills of the employees and supervisors and managers of the program. Because here's the thing with these 72 people. In an ideal world, they will have to find a job. I don't think they could remain unemployed for the next 5 months. Maybe they will. Maybe some of them will. Maybe they'll get temporary jobs. Or maybe if we had a proper economy with a proper job market, these 72 people, generally speaking, unless their skills are so specialized, they would find employment elsewhere long term. But we don't have that, do we? Ironically, our poor job market might actually be to the benefit of this program. We could save approximately $12.5 million. Well, half of that really. So it's more like $6 million. $6.25 million by leaving. Maybe the 2.5 might not actually be full salaries only. But let's just go with that, assume. That's how much we'll be saving to have these people out on the street. Is that a good thing? Is that not a good thing? There are pros and cons there, to be honest. But the point is, how did this happen? If this program is important, why has it not been actually getting any new students since January? And to what extent have we made these various arms of government basically to be instruments of politicians to do whatever it is that they want to do at the time? And to some extent, they can't really, in some cases, function without political directives. They weren't appointed for that. They weren't hired for that. They're not built for that. They're not ready for that. Which means that literally it's corruption or nothing in some cases. That's the implication of this. To me, they are incapable of functioning for whatever reason unless a politician kind of gives them some special attention. And usually that's not just going to be on the up and up. There'll be some amount of interference there, because if you don't play ball, why is your program getting this money? I could give the money. I could allocate it elsewhere. I'll go into an old topic from last week that I'll get into the ASP. He's unfortunately unable to join us today, but it gives me time to flesh out a couple of topics last week that I said I probably would still keep, maybe not in its full capacity, but probably will now, since I have the time. Topics, one of them speaks, or two of them are on a similar vein to this, but we'll get into that later. Another thing to look out, Energy Minister Dr. Rudal Munilal, he is pointing to the fact, or he and his ministry are monitoring what's going on with Chevron and Venezuela. The US government is allowing Chevron to resume energy exploration in Venezuela, with the caveat that Chevron is not going to be paying duties or taxes. I believe royalties or taxes would go to the Maduro regime. Now, I'm not entirely sure exactly what Venezuela would therefore get out of this. Chevron is going to do exploration, find stuff, and maybe start extracting stuff. I don't know if they'll be given the ability to extract fossil fuels for their own economic benefit and leave the Venezuelan government out to dry. Maybe this is Maduro's way to try to rebuild some sort of economic or diplomatic understanding with the United States. This is a very different situation, I would imagine, compared to our Dragon gas situation. However, maybe it opens the door for a way forward. Maybe even the Prime Minister said it's technically not dead, it's just unlikely to be restored anytime soon, right? Now, the ball is really in the court of Venezuela, which is, again, one of the reasons why I never understood the PNM's position on the Dragon deal. It was almost as though their reputation lived and died by the deal, when the fact of the matter was a lot of it was out of their hands. They are not that brilliant to take a random source of diplomatic damage, a random source of international instability. They are not, no one is brilliant enough to convince Maduro to not do Maduro things. But apparently, the international relations understanding and the political aptitude and the political awareness of some politicians could not seem to grasp that there are going to be some situations where a foreign power is going to be unreasonable, and no amount of individual brilliance is going to play any significant role if they decide to do whatever it is that they want to do. Like have elections that are not presenting or presentable as free and fair. It wasn't Trump that had that caveat, it was Biden. It wasn't Trump's administration that said that it wasn't free and fair elections, it was Biden's. So we'll see. Hopefully this government will have a bit more realistic expectations for Maduro and not put all of its eggs in the Dragon basket. Because it is technically the most effective. It's the most effective basket with regards to energy that we have in the immediate future right now. But we have to wait and see. Doesn't mean that it's doable. Now, switching gears slightly, there is, well, the PCA director is under fire, and I'll just say this. There are calls for his resignation because apparently he's not supporting police enough. And I find that sentiment rather laughable, to be honest. My concerns about the PCA director is he doesn't have enough teeth. He and his organization doesn't seem to have enough teeth to be that independent entity to hold the police to account. So, to some extent, if he is speaking in terms of not supporting the police, I hate to break this to you. That's kind of, to some degree, should be his default perspective. To question everything the police does and not trust anything with regards to police violence or negative police interactions. His job is not to give the police the benefit of the doubt. We can give the police the benefit of the doubt. His job is to look into these things. And you don't look into these things saying, it should be fine, you know. We'll just kind of go through the motions. And no. Especially when there's been an uptick of police shootings, at least ones that hit the press. And they should be looked into. Because we don't want police going off as vigilantes. I don't care if police ends up shooting someone and they're dying in the course of their duties. I care if that happens outside the framework of their duty. Because to some extent, whether we like it or not, even criminals have certain protections in law, and it's not meant to necessarily protect them because they're innocent until proven guilty. It's meant to protect all of us in case there is a situation of mistaken identity, false accusations, etc., etc. It is not just, oh my gosh, we need to protect the criminals. Sean is such a bleeding heart. There will be times throughout history, it's just a matter of time when we get into situations where it's not a gang member, it's not a drug lord, it's not a kidnapper. It's going to be someone accused of something, gets in a tense situation, does an act that might look like maybe they were going to make a move. Oh, wait, they weren't. But let's just, believe all police all the time. As opposed to clear, and this is the other thing, if we don't have a robust enough oversight that will not just go through the motion and say everything is fine, or give a surface level investigation, everything is fine. If we have weak accountability for the police, when people start to complain about police interactions and police killings, eventually that will erode the trust and confidence of the police throughout the general public. So whoever is sending out this message, if you want to say, fire the PCA director because he's ineffective, well, to whatever extent it is based on his job performance and not based on the system that he is confined to work in, all right, maybe we could discuss that. But if it is because he's not supporting the police, like if that's his job is to take complaints about the police. In what world should his default position be to support them all the time? Anyway, ironically, people whose agenda it is to want to get a more supportive police complaints authority, think about that. Think about that oxymoron there. They will, in the long run, hate police support within the general population if they get their way. Of course, they probably won't see it that way, but that is what's going to happen. That is what is going to happen. If you take what remaining teeth oversight bodies like BCA have, that is what's going to happen. All right. Before I go on too long, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get into some modern topics. I may or may not, there's some new stuff coming out of the prisons and prison service. And it is extremely frustrating at how tone deaf the Prison Officers Association, it's just one of those things where one really has to ask, whose duty do they serve? Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.
Lucky on talking point now. I didn't necessarily want to go into it, but I feel like I gave too much of a preview to not say anything about it. So with regards to the latest complaints by the Prison Association, the Prisons Union, I will just point out what potentially and what seems most likely to be a statement of ignorance. Not necessarily guaranteed, right? But this is what it seems like, at least to me. And maybe I'm wrong, but this is my opinion. Now, there has been should I say complaints? We got word from the Minister of Defense that there was a 65-inch television inside a prison cell. Now, the association head, Gerard Gordon, said, well, three-quarters of the prisoners are remand prisoners and they're not convicted, so they should not be denied access to watching the news and movies. That's very nice and all, right? Although this is one of those weird things where, I don't know, you want to tell me that you think it's justifiable to give creature comforts to people on remand? That might be something that in the current environment, the population might not necessarily like, but maybe he's right. The problem with that statement is, according to another report, I believe this is the report on the situation with Building 13 in the maximum security prison, the TV was not in the general population or a common area for prisoners on remand. It was in, potentially, the room of an inmate, one of the inmates involved in the potential plot, the alleged plot. It was in his cell. At the very least, it was said to be in Building 13. Building 13 was basically a place where they put a lot of the high-risk prisoners, a lot of the big-time gang members, not remand people. So what that tells me is one of two things. Either Mr. Gordon is trying to find a defense in the situation and he is knowingly or unknowingly not necessarily saying the truth. Like I said, unknowingly, unintentionally, most likely based on how it was phrased, although this could be how the reporter typed it and not necessarily completely the context of the association head. It could be that he himself was not fully aware of the situation before he spoke, because he's just speaking in generalities. Well, there should be TVs for the remand prisoners, right? Except Building 13 is not that. There's a whole report in the Newsday yesterday with regards to the amenities and the concessions that the inmates of Building 13 got. And there's at least in the report, it identifies at least 2 cases where people were attacked or more, because I think it was at least 2 were killed. And then the Deputy Commissioner of Prisons attack was also tied to requests not being granted. Let's put it that way. I think there was 1 officer and 1 superintendent that were killed for denying certain things the prisoners wanted. And I just want to know exactly what is the association head trying to sell us at this point. Because I don't know what the details are, right? I just know what the results are. And I know that his excuses are not justifying the results of what we see, regardless of the plot, because part of the results is the death of his own fellow prison officers. But somehow, yes, I know he's probably decried it, and they have been asking for improved conditions in the prisons, but I don't know, the ineffectiveness of these declarations, of these requests, of these pleas, because we're not getting information to fully explain what goes on in the prison. And it's one thing to say, hey, you're not going to really understand the reality, so we can't necessarily reveal everything behind the curtain. But that usually goes into the minutiae of decision-making of how you punish, when you punish, what measures you take in order to discipline prisoners, stuff like that. Not who gets a hot plate, who gets a TV, who gets a PlayStation, who gets a cell phone. To what extent did this happen due to the previous administration? We don't know. To what extent did this happen because of the political pressure from the previous administration not to make us look bad, despite the fact that we may or may not be doing anything about it? I'm speaking rhetorically. I don't know. There have been reports that the situation, at least under Stuart Young, was in a much better place than where it eventually ended up. And that would have been under the stewardship of Fitzgerald Hines. And it might speak to the fact that unless the minister has his eye on the ball, the situation will crumble. Almost like a CEO, once he gets a new pet project, the investment people know to run. The implication is, if national security was a private business, whatever analogy you want to put into there, there would be no investors seeking to invest in our national security, at least under Hines. That's the implication. I don't know how true that is. A lot of people say that's probably true given what we have seen. It's kind of sad. It's kind of sad, right? Regardless of how we got there, there's only one thing we can know for sure. It didn't happen within the last 90 days. So that any attempt to throw the current administration under that bus, for that reason, would be foolhardy. You want to go about the bilateral crime talks failing, that's a separate issue. That's a separate issue. Lack of cooperation for legislation on criminal laws, fine, we could go there and speak about the UNC on that as opposition. Because I haven't necessarily forgotten about that. I haven't necessarily forgotten about the fact that to some extent, politics was played with our national security on both sides of the parliamentarian aisle. And now when they come together and sing Kumbaya, we need to see results. More on that next, because now there's more to that prison story that I'll get into, but it is just very annoying. I don't want to hear any more excuses from the association anymore. Because to me, I don't see anything justifiable about the results that we have seen. I don't see anything that they have to say that's going to make it understandable. And a lot of people might say that I am being unfair. Well, you know what? That's what was said when I gave my opinion about the then Commissioner, Edward Christopher. It was, I don't even think, 6 months before I sniffed out the fact that this was going to be a disaster. And people said I was unfair. But when the signs are there, the signs are there. If it looks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, and it walks like a duck, it properly is the manure that we are smelling in the moment. Now, let's go into the daily review. The Prime Minister has retained political leadership of the United National Congress. She has done so unopposed. And now this is her fourth consecutive internal election win. This time it was declared, given the fact that officially no one stepped up to oppose her. This is, to some extent, expected, given the fact that right now she has more or less all the power within the UNC, right? Whoever serves in whatever capacity does so at her pleasure, and they will do their best not to suffer her displeasure. The problem is not that she has too much power and how she exercises that. for the most part, at least on the surface, at least what we have seen in cabinet, and to a significant amount of what we've seen the government within the last 90 days, I'm cool with her having this much power right now. The problem is the future. When she goes, that vacuum will be ginormously overly large. Even bigger to some extent than Keith Rowley's absence in the PNM. And we all saw how quickly that went downhill. It went downhill so fast. For years, probably since the first year of Talking Point, maybe a few months into the first year of Talking Point, or by the second year, we were speaking, I was wondering how would the PNM look moving on from Dr. Rowley? Because he did mention something a couple years ago, not too long after 2020, about his future retirement. Well, I did not expect it to be so spectacular and disappointing with regards to how they're dealing with it. It could have been fireworks and it could have been fire, but with regards to the UNC, this is one of the things in the immediate recent past that they have to look at their political opponents and say, hey, let's try not to do that. The problem is, similar to the PNM, how many individual agendas and why am I forgetting this word? People who have ambitions. There we go. I apologize, it's early. Individual ambitions. Kamala Prasad-Bissessar is successfully suppressing it, probably even more than Dr. Keith Rowley did when he was political leader. She is successfully suppressing it to such a degree. It'll be interesting to see whose individual agendas really show their head within the next year or so. And I think it's helping give the people a certain amount of trust and faith in the overall UNC. Not everybody, not in everybody, but the overall, because she has all of the ministers on manners. But what happens when she eventually goes? And some of the key figures for this cabinet, in my opinion, key figures, would be going with her. They are not there to be political leader of the UNC, unless there's some very extreme circumstances of national need. Now, a lot of her messaging is, again, you know, her love for the nation, having faith in her. And I get that. I appreciate that. And these are things that she should be saying. I get it. It's just that there are elements in her government which are not necessarily following through with that sentiment. They're not in line with that vision of how the current administration should be moving, should be presenting itself. They're not necessarily in line with that brand. It's not as bad as the opposition, where it seems as though everybody is not in line with their leader. At least the MPs. I'll talk about the new deputy political leaders when next. But with regards to the UNC, there's a lot of questions where some of the vocal members of the cabinet, they've said a lot of things to piss off a lot of people. And it's not about necessarily what they actually did or did not do. That's debatable, and there's room for blame there. But rather, the biggest thing is with regards to perception, right? It's a situation where those who know me on Face of Sports, follow the NFL, when a player or executive or owner does anything, you know, that causes any amount of negative press, they will be disciplined by the league because they would be basically, this is the term used, damaging the shield, damaging the brand of the league, damaging the business of the league. And this is what, at times, individual politicians do to their own parties, which is funny because they tend to be lemmings. We follow the leader, we follow the party line, and yet somehow they still have the capacity to damage the shield, to damage the brand of the party, and in this case, to damage the rising sun in the opposition's case, to damage the Balizé. So this is not an unexpected situation, but it highlights to me how critical, ironically, Kamala Persad-Bissessar is to the government. A lot of people want to see her fail. It's like, no, I don't want to see her fail, because if she is removed for whatever reason, we will probably get worse. And to some extent, potentially, that was true in the other party's case. Some people might disagree with that, but I actually do think to some extent it is true. Although he, whether by his choice or by choices out of his hands, that cabinet had a lot of ambition. This cabinet, a lot of ambition was removed out of the potential members. So we have to wait and see with the current crop of who's left, where they're going to go from here. Now, one of the things coming out of this weekend, I believe it should be in today's papers, the minister in the office of the Prime Minister wanted to point out the strong, this is Barry Padarath, Minister of Public Utilities, wanted to point out the strong progress that the government has made in the first 90 days since the general election. These are the points that apparently Minister Padarath has apparently listed out. Scrapping the TTRA, I would argue amending the TTRA or fixing the TTRA might have been better than scrapping it. But it is what it is. Let's not forget the TTRA, as the general basic idea, predates the Keith Rowley administration and had specific reasons. But halting the WASA transformation plan, preserving thousands of jobs. That's very interesting. My complaint on this is, as I've said multiple times in the past, this was their intentions going into the election. Yes, they were voted in to do this. It was a campaign promise, except there was no consideration to look and see, hey, what is the actual situation before we go off half-baked? No, we're just going to do it anyway, because we need to save all of these thousands of jobs. Because the PRM was looking to transform WASA, a situation that I don't think anyone believed to be in a healthy position with regards to its HR situation. But because the PRM were doing it, obviously it has to be evil, so we must reverse it completely and not even look into amending it, modifying it, or what have you. Meanwhile, CPEP and URP, what about our jobs? Canceling planned increases to electricity tariffs. This one is very iffy because it was suspected by a lot of people, myself included, but I don't think it was ever said to be coming. It's just that they were moving as though, yeah, this probably would be coming, but I don't think it was ever confirmed. And in fact, at times it was denied. Maybe I missed it, so I don't necessarily know to what extent could I believe this third point or not. Removing the traffic demerit point system. This is kind of an easy one. It's not that hard to remove it. Let's be frank. This didn't take a lot of debate, at least how it was done. Appointing a new police commissioner. Again, this was not something that would have taken half of your tenure, appointing a new police commissioner. The PCA, the Police Service Commission, the PSC, the POLSC, appointed by the previous administration, had a merit list, you received it, it went to the president, it went to parliament, you debated it, you got a police commissioner. If you want to say we got a good police commissioner and you want kudos for that, all right, fine. But saying that you appointed a new police commissioner, that process, that ain't all that much to it, really. Improving access to water, social services, and healthcare. How? And to what extent did some of those things, like plans to improve access to water, were they already within the pipe? Because you mean to tell me that you're going to have long-term projects approved and delivered within 90 days? Is that what it is? We're going to have new water supplies, the whole tendering process, the whole work process, the whole evaluation process, all of that, and then the construction and the implementation. All of that is going to be within 90 days off of a PNM budget. Because let's not forget, that's the defense. Any media budget review, this is really our budget. We're trying to work within the constraints of a PNM budget. That means that for the most part, a lot of what happens now, potentially, with regards to major spends and major projects, were potentially PNM projects. So I don't know about this last one. And then he doesn't even have a lot of details here. So improved access to healthcare, I haven't heard of anything with regards to improved access to healthcare. Improve access to social services, I haven't really heard anything to improve access to social services. Where is the government mid-year budget review and trying to make adjustments to keep the government's financial situation afloat? He could have mentioned that. He didn't mention that. Whereas with regards to the flood mitigation efforts by the Minister of Works and the Minister of Local Government, he didn't mention that. Why not? What about the work that the Minister of National Security and Minister of Defense are doing? No, what he mentioned was, oh, well, we selected a new commissioner of police. Of all the things, to some extent, of dealing with crime, just getting a new body there is not an accomplishment. Getting a good commissioner is, but that is not reportedly what he said. And of course, you know, we'll have to assess the commissioner, you know, with more time. He appears to be pretty good, has his limitations, but he has the juice where we need him to have it. All of the secondary stuff, we wish he had it, but if we have to live with a commissioner that doesn't have all the skills in the secondary stuff, we can live with that. We have too much pressing needs. We need a serious guy with skills in the right areas to deal with the situation. Cool. But we didn't necessarily get into that. Better days are ahead for the country. It requires tough decisions, a long-term vision for the country, and a sustainable plan for children. That's nice. We're not necessarily hearing anything with regards to that. We got some of that from the Prime Minister when she gave us basically a state of the country as we found it. And I believe the first post-CAB press briefing, which was one of the rarest press briefings we've had since COVID, where I would argue, as much as there were things about it that the government did that I did not agree with, when the Prime Minister and the Minister of Health were there in front of the people, I don't think they were trying to be, at the very least, totally disingenuous, or even disingenuous. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. But Minister Padarath is trying to have a victory lap over what I don't know. Because most of these things I won't say are positives. They're not that big of a deal to me. Repealing, scrapping the TTRA did not improve anything. What it did was remove something that you claim to be a problem that the previous administration couldn't defend, or did a poor job defending anyway, but it didn't actually deal with any of the actual existing problems we have. Neither did halting the WASA transformation plan. Preserve thousands of jobs to what end? Prove to me that the employment situation in WASA was not similar to the employment situation in CPEP and URP. We have no discussions on that, do we? The only thing about WASA that we know to have been actually proven, the only detail out of all of this nonsense, ironically, is Opposition Chief Whip Marvin Gonzalez. His claims, to some extent, has been proven. Not fully, but instead of defending your position, you declined to answer questions in Parliament. Why? Is it kind of strange of me to say? That doesn't look so hot. Now, not everything that the opposition said I agree with, but this is a case where if this is the best of if this is what the government thinks is their best points of the last 90 days, I'm kind of sad. Even what Dr. Munilal did, whether it was due to him, due to what the PNM, whatever, even just how he is approaching the Ministry of Energy is more important to me than a lot of what's on this list. Okay, right. The best thing probably would be the removal of the demerit point system. Because that is a case where the public had a desire and they executed it quickly in a way that I think was relatively responsible. But everything else seems to be trying to fluff up things, a couple of which, the first two, are highly controversial, at least to me. And in my opinion, are just as easily negatives as they are positives, to varying degrees and in various ways. in the case of the TTRA and in the case of WASA, it wasn't just what you did, but it was more along the lines of how you did it and why. But anyway, let me not spend too long on this. Actually, running out of time, I might not even get into the other topics. But I do have to acknowledge that the opposition leader has picked the political leader of the PNM. She's picked new deputy political leaders, and the choices are interesting. And I'll go through the choices and then go to the commentary provided by one of our regulars on the show. First off, Colm Imbit is deputy political leader for legislative matters. Then we have Jennifer Baptiste Primus as deputy leader for party and election matters. And this is very interesting. The person that was selected. Last, we have someone who I don't know very well at all, Sanjeev Budu. He is the former PNM Kumuto Manzal Nilla candidate in the last election. His responsibilities are for policy. So I would imagine he'll be looking both to analyze government policy and potentially crafting opposition proposals. Will such things actually be presented to the public? Because the opposition tends to, this is to some extent what the UNC, Dave Tanku said this on AM Prime. It's not his job, or he doesn't want to give away the secret sauce. Still waiting for his great ideas. He said he could, it's not hard to run a country with a $60 billion budget, except when, 11 or 9 to 11 billion of that is a deficit year to year. I don't know. Now, so those are the three deputy leaders. Dr. Shane Mohammed gave commentary to a local newspaper speaking about all three. And he actually had some constructive things to say. Let me put it that way. I don't want to say positive, that it makes it look like he holistically approves of the individual, but to some extent he approved of the appointment because it made technical sense, right? He pointed out for Imbit, despite his arrogance and aggression, he is one of the few remaining politicians who has an old school political approach. But I think this is more important. I see Mr. Imbit as a necessity for the institution, not a part of the party, but also understanding the legislative perspective, right? He's pointing to Mr. Imbit's institutional knowledge, that experience with regards to how government is run. It didn't necessarily help him with the Auditor General situation and understanding what an audit is and what his limits should be. But at the end of the day, he does have experience. And with that comes knowledge. And with that knowledge basically comes with we don't have to make all of the same mistakes that we've made already, because I know how it worked out and I could at least tell you, hey, these are obvious things we should not be doing. Hopefully, the Auditor General thing might have been a new mistake, but at least he would have in his own memory a living record of this is what the party has gone through for the last however many years. So, and a lack of experience in a significant part of the opposition is a heavy detriment, I believe, right now. Because arguably some of the worst parts of both the PNM and the UNC are their inexperienced members. We all say we want new youth candidates, right? We want more young people. But more often than not, I'm getting disappointed by the young people, by the new people, by the inexperienced people who should have their own ideas and fresh approaches, but tend to fall back to the pack and do the same old nonsense, just less elegantly, less intelligently, less gracefully, less efficiently than the older head. So at this point, why get young people if they're going to be lesser versions than the people that are already there? Now, Jennifer Baptiste Primus had a very interesting take because, of course, she herself is an interesting person. She, you could argue, was one of those steady, objective voices of dissent of what was going on when Dr. Keith Rowley decided to, retire. And she was not necessarily combative, but arguably she showed a lot of gumption, a lot of integrity. Now, you could say maybe she had her ambitions or not. I don't know. I don't necessarily think she has ambitions to be political leader, which makes me respect her even all the more. And essentially, someone who came into the party while it was in opposition, as opposed to some of these others that came into the party, some of the other senior leadership that came into the party when it was in government. She's trying to right the ship once again. And she was willing to speak out publicly against it, one of the few, because when everybody else was trying to sing Kumbaya, she was like, hold on, there's a problem here. And it's going to be to our detriment. So said, so done. She didn't do anything to undermine the party in the election. Let me make that clear. At least in my opinion, I didn't see it. She was kind of pointing out what would be obvious to most people that don't have rose-colored glasses for the Balizé. Now, one of the interesting things that Dr. Mohammed said about her was that he didn't necessarily see it as important for her to be a deputy political leader, right? Now, to some extent, Baptiste Primus's principal stance, I think part of it is to try to assure the public and assure the membership, hey, she took a principal stance. There's a certain amount of integrity here, or the perception of integrity. And we want to show that our executive has that. We're not just going with the business as usual politics. Now, Dr. Mohammed said that he would have preferred former PRO Laurel Lazama. Here's the thing. I agree. I think Laurel Lazama would have made a very good deputy political leader, assuming that some of the hotheads would listen to her, and assuming that Penelope Beckles is willing to work with Laurel Lazama. She would have, I think, the ability to help Penelope Beckles with regards to messaging, leadership, strategy, in working the PNM's way out of the hole that the last 2 years have dug for itself, and the last 6 months, the last 8 months, deep on that hole tremendously. But I still like Jennifer Baptiste Primus as deputy political leader because of that very thing, because she took a principled stance, and to some extent, you need that cachet, you need that political capital that she earned, because I think to some extent there will be a part of the membership that will trust the executive more just because she's on it. Now, Laurel Lazama was named International Liaison Officer. To what extent that's kind of just a placeholder to keep someone with her talents, I don't know, but I think that's generally good for the party. Yes, she is a political operator and she probably has her own ambitions, but she has shown a willingness to do the work and suffer a lot in the process and not complain publicly. So to some extent, I could appreciate that. The last person, Mr. Sanjeev Boodoo. We have to see how that plays out, right? I don't think Dr. Mohammed had significant comments on Mr. Boodoo. He is potentially a new face. He did point out, the main thing they pointed out is this could be an attempt to try to again promote diversity, which everybody does at the leadership public facing level. It's if you could achieve it at the lower ranks. We have to wait and see. But potentially with regards to policy now, and this is the thing, to some extent, maybe what you want to see new, fresh, young faces for is new policy ideas, because a lot of where governments kind of feel is where the policy ends up being the same old, right? They get too enamored with the same old, or they're just too lazy to try and do something new. And maybe what you need is, yes, politicians who understand not to make the same mistakes as their predecessors. And you need politicians with regards for communication skills. Ironically, not all the older heads have it. but we've seen the younger heads kind of fail even more spectacularly. But with regards to policy and new ideas, and again, you have IMBIT there for legislation, I believe, so that's the check and balance. So we have to wait and see how this turns out. Who knows? This could be one of the things where I'm not saying he's going to be like Barack Obama. It's just an example on the concept. When Barack Obama's political career reached, I think, the Senate, no one necessarily had any big aspirations with regards to what he could achieve. Now he went all the way to the top. I'm not saying that this guy is going to be prime minister, Mr. Boodoo. What I am saying is, who knows, he might become a key figure of the PNM. We don't know. This is one of those things where I think people seem to understand. There are two types of Trinidadians in this world. Those that want to see their party win at all costs, and those that want to see our country do well. And if you're one of the latter, you should be hoping that the UNC and the PNM do better, are more effective. A more effective opposition and majority government is better for the governance of the country. So it's not about cheerleading for the PNM and, oh gosh, you're liking them and you want to see it and you have unrealistic hopes or whatever. No, it's not about that. It's that we need better. And we've seen the TPP slip a little bit, but then bring themselves back up to a good point. We've seen the UNC start to slip a little bit, but it still has that anchor of Kamala Persad-Bissessar there that got them back to this point. Now, to what extent will the PNM, will these appointments of deputy political leaders help Penelope Beckles get the party out of the doldrums it finds itself in? Because it is way behind. And it doesn't matter what Stuart Young says, Marvin Gonzalez says, Faris Alwari says, Foster Cummings says. All of their bluster, seemingly they do not understand they are way behind their opponents. And even if you want to be a Balize till I die, I ride it with them till the end, the UNC, I will never support them. Even if you are that, you have to acknowledge the hole that they've dug themselves in and how they are not doing anything positive to rectify the situation. Coleman Bate is a big player in the PNM. That's a lot of weight. And he's back from the time that Penelope Beckles is also from, as opposed to a lot of these young ones, including, ironically, she's not necessarily young, but Jennifer Batiste Primus is not from back in those days. So to what extent is this mix? You have new, you have old, you have someone with knowledge and experience, but in between, with regards to when she joined, it's an interesting cross-section. How much will it help the political leader? And how much will the MPs continue to ignore the style of messaging and the vision that she wants to promote for the PNM moving forward? Because I'll say this, her inability to be a rah-rah politician, the only thing that I really am concerned about that is with regards to the MPs under her trying to potentially undermine or overshadow her. And seemingly she does not have that bite or bark to get them in line as to what her political opponent, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, proved she was able to do. And to what extent now is this going to keep the PNM hamstrung? And forget the next election. Well, they say people will have to hope for 10 years from now, maybe they might have a chance in that election, depending on how this goes. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll open up the phone lines. Maybe I will throw in some commentary on the NCC situation and the live sports situation in between the calls. Stay tuned. This is Talking Point on WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Struggling with heart health or frequent migraines? Discover the simple steps to reclaim your energy and vitality.
We're diving into a topic that affects about 422 million people around the world. Diabetes.
Tune into Wellness Unlocked, the series that delivers expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and well-being. Your health matters. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and take the first step toward better health.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title, it's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
Welcome back to Talking Points. The Content Capital, sorry, multitasking here. First of all, want to say I will extend the apologies on behalf of ASP Christopher Arun. He wasn't able to join us. Of course, usually we have him every Monday. Hopefully, we'll be able to join us tomorrow. So it was a last-minute thing. We had to pivot. Yes, I know sometimes people don't like that I talk too much. It is what it is. This is, at the end of the day, one of those things, right? I have no issue talking just by myself. You could listen to me or not. Hopefully, you will listen to me even if you disagree and then call in and challenge what it is I'm saying. Now, with that said, we are opening up the phone lines. You could call in and have your say. Am I being too hard on the prison service? Am I being too hard on the government? Am I being too hard on Minister Paradas? Am I being too hard on the opposition members, right? Some of the opposition members who I liked when they were in government have been saying some things that I can't necessarily agree with. I don't know why. Both MP Gonzalez, Opposition Chief Whip Gonzalez, as well as the Prison Association is going to say such things over this TV situation that's going to just leave me bewildered with regards to, hey, guys, y'all kind of missing the point here with this one. Or at least the analysis ain't up to scratch. Now, we opened up the phone lines. Like I said, you can call and have your say on this or many other things. There were a couple other topics that, one that I missed that I didn't want to speak about. The lawyer for the murder accused in Candace Honore's death murder. That attorney has been charged for perverting the course of justice. Again, I believe the TTP has basically said it could have been someone on behalf of the TPS said, I think it is the commissioner, you know, be careful, he is innocent until proven guilty, right? This is one of those things where, look, if they didn't have evidence that he did anything, I did say if they had evidence that he did something, as opposed to just, you know, well, my client is here and he's hiding and I'm trying to get him to surrender, right? Maybe he was more active in his client's evasion of the police. I don't know. We'll wait and see. We'll now let a court decide that the assumption is there was enough to charge him based on the assessment by the DPP. So that takes the narrative in a different direction. It puts it in a different conversation. So what it was initially where, well, if you just discover the accused there, the suspect there, is that enough to charge the attorney? I did say it was one of those things where I could understand where the attorney could be charged, but to some extent, even if the attorney could be charged in a vacuum without any other consideration, I still would say the attorney did the right thing. This is one of those things where doing the right thing may not afford you, you know, not having to face consequences for it. That's one of the things about whistleblowing now. To some extent, you still have to face certain consequences if you're a whistleblower, depending on if you break the law or not. We have Dabadi on the line. Good morning, caller, you on the air?
Hi, Sean. Morning.
Morning.
Hello. Yes, Sean. Quickly with one or two calls. Sanjeev Buddhu, the newly appointed deputy political is an attorney at law and formerly from the Davidi Malabar Musical constituency that you work here with me. Excellent and astute pick. So I don't think that the political leader went wrong with it. I want to get quickly down into the Sean, are you saying something?
No, go ahead.
All right, yeah. On the police now, I am one of your callers that always criticize the police, and in the beginning I was not that much in favor of the police commissioner. I think that he is on the right track. Example being the visit to Rio Claro, where the guy in 1990 who had passed, and they also took part in the commemoration Elena the Reeks. So I think he is actually on the right track. The state of emergency, we are seeing results from it, and I want to give the commissioner a B+ grade this morning. The commissioner of police seems to be on the right track, but again, he needs that support from the other senior members of the executive. Last and not least, Sean, I want to mention the role and functions of the independent PCA. And you didn't talk about that this morning, but for some reason, Mr. West
I did actually.
appears, in my opinion, seems to be going against the police. Police killings, I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but when police going to shoot out with bandits, it appears as though they say that it's like a deliberate shooting on the police behalf, when it's basically self-defense, Sean. You know, so I hope that Mr. West will understand his position and allow the police a free hand to do the work. Some police are really, when they take a look at it, they are afraid, Sean, to squeeze that trigger for fear of repercussion. All right? So I'll allow other persons to make the contribution, and wonderful program as usual, Sean. You have a nice day.
Thank you, caller. I'll say this. I'll disagree ideologically with what you said. I understand you don't want a police complaints authority that's going to be an antagonist to the police, right? That's when you basically get, if this is Hollywood, you'll get the show where, you know, it's a show about cops, and the IA cop, the internal affairs cop, he's not just trying to investigate a matter. He has an axe to grind. He has an agenda. We don't necessarily want anything that'll come close to that, right? We don't want David West to be an antagonist. But his job is not to be a supporter. He's not there to kind of rubber stamp whatever the police does. Now, I get it. That, yes, a lot of the times it's going to be self-defense. I'm willing to make that assumption. I say assumption because we don't always see the results of investigations. Part of his job, it's kind of like why society has defense attorneys, who are essentially going to be biased for their client. Now, he's not necessarily supposed to be biased against the police, but he can't be biased for the police, right? Because we need to see him have a robust investigation. Because then if he says, everything is fine, nothing to see here, we know that he didn't say that due to having a bias for the police. He said that despite not favoring them. He doesn't need to be biased against them, but he needs to not favor them. So when he says that everything is on the up and up, that's a stronger statement of support. And I think, yes, people might not like the job he's doing, but the criticisms and that are leading to the demand for his resignation, to justify those demands, I think are counterproductive for even that agenda, because it's like a weak opposition allows the government to do all kind of nonsense. Well, weak accountability allows the police to get away with all kind of nonsense. I mean, look at what's going on in the prison service. And we don't want to see that. That's human nature, right? It is what it is. Before I continue to go on the monologue too long, we have a money line. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Morning, John.
Morning.
No, I want to discuss rights this morning. And why I say rights, because last week when I mentioned jail must be made harder, so prisoners must come out on the road to work.
Yeah.
And the ASP spoke about the rights of persons on remand. I wanted to ask him these questions. All right? Firstly, as a victim of crime, whether your home invaded, you're robbed, when the police arrest these people, do you get compensation? What rights you have? Secondly, if you've been to the hospital either for clinic or you're going to the pharmacy to follow up to get a prescription filled, and prisoners come, they see about them before you. If you're on the road driving, you hear a siren, you have to pull aside, all right. Then you realize this prisoner's going up good. And then on top of that, $20,000 of my tax money every month to maintain them. And they going into prison and like it's Hilton Hotel because the college shot left, right, and center. I don't think that is fair. My belief is this. We have an army who is sitting down there, the defense force. I see they playing netball, they playing football. They go start to play cricket just now. Bring them out. And take these fellas out of the prison when the day come. And have them working in various projects in Trinidad and Tobago, like cleaning the highways, doing things like what CPEP was doing. Yes, so that prison, you mustn't be, when you think about it, you say, nah, boy, it's better I do the right thing because it's 4 o'clock every morning, you have to get up and you have to move. You have to help build back what you try to destroy. And then he's talking about rights, and I realize all rights are not absolute. Hasn't the state of emergency suspended some of our rights? The government have a constitutional majority. I find it's time all prisoners, when the day come out of the jail and come on the side of the road and work like everybody else. Because that's why they're there in the first place. They don't want to work. They see easy money. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. Well, here's the... I think you are potentially misunderstanding what it is that was said. I think it might have been by Ashraf last week or ASP Arun last week. Remand and convicts are two different things, first of all, right? So the point is convicted people will have less rights than those on remand. The shot calling and the TVs and the privileges, that was Building 13. Those were convicts. Complaining about their rights on remand is different. And the thing with regards to the healthcare system, as was said either by one of the media ambassadors, well, the hospital or the clinic or the pharmacy, they want those prisoners to leave as soon as possible. So they will put them on priority to get them out. We don't want them here for too long because it's a risk. It's a risk to take them out to the prison, right? So we don't want, the hospital doesn't want to have to deal with that risk. The guards don't want to have to deal with that risk either. They want, I don't think they're necessarily, I don't know if they go to a health center or to a hospital, I don't know about a pharmacy, but they want them gone as soon as possible. And I understand that policy. We might not like it because we would be forced to wait, but would you rather you're waiting in line to go and they just put the prisoner there next to all you, even if there was a secure room to sequester them in? How many people would like that? Next thing you know, they try to shoot up the pharmacy or the health center for a prison break. Those are the kind of risks that the prison officers and the health facility are thinking about, and they don't want to have that for too long. So it's better to just move them out as soon as possible. Now, shot callers are not the guys in remand, like I said. The problem is remand, people on remand are not convicted. They are still technically innocent. And that's basically what the point that was trying to be made last week. It's not the same. The thing, and this is the thing, don't allow yourselves to be tricked by the head of the prison association. Because he and all saying, well, the people on remand deserve to watch TV. The TV in question was in Building 13 with those convicted gangsters that allegedly are part of this plot that caused the whole SOE to happen. And the details coming out of this weekend is the plot was going to be something to do around the anniversary of the coup, potentially targeting members of the judiciary or prison officers, prison service, including a defense attorney, which that one I found quite interesting. If they want to bite the hand that protects them in court, good luck with that. How many lawyers will look to be defense attorneys moving forward? And all of a sudden, it'll go from a buyer's market to a seller's market real fast. So that is a bit tricky. I did say that I don't know if a lot of people will care to stomach the head of the association's comments on prison officers and what they deserve. I don't think a lot of people will care for them to have the capacity to watch television, right? And to some extent, you have to understand, you can't just have all of the criminals in a box and just basically work them until they die. Because not all of them are going to be hardened gangsters and murderers. A lot of these rights are not there to protect the worst of the worst. It's essentially to provide a baseline of humanity, because not everybody is the worst of the worst. And also, this goes back into to what extent you believe in rehabilitation or not. And if you treat people, if you treat all of them like the worst of the worst, those who are not that bad, some people might be falsely accused, some people might be there on lesser crimes, but they will be pushed to be that bad. You will make more hardened, bloodthirsty, ruthless criminals out of people who were not necessarily at that point when they got into the system, particularly if you're saying people on remand need to be treated that way. Because you and I are not immune to be arrested and put on remand. We haven't murdered anybody, I assume, so we are technically, as long as that holds to be true, we are supposedly, for the most part, but not guaranteed to be immune from being charged with murder. But we could be arrested for who knows what and end up in remand for who knows how long. And it could be a false accusation. It could be a misidentification, a wrongful arrest. Yes, the worse you're treated, the more money you could get in the lawsuit 5 years later, 10 years later, however long. Do you want to go through that hardship to get that money? So, remand is trickier. But a lot of the complaints about the prison situation is not about remand. It's about actual convicted prisoners having access to things they should not have access to. Don't let the whole defense of the association or wanting to, in my opinion, confuse that situation with the remand situation and to lump them together. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing because according, at least assuming the news reports are true, a lot of the prisoners who are allegedly part of this whole plot that caused the SOE in the first place, they were not in the same building. At least I believe they weren't. Maybe they were in, they had remand prisoners who were known gangsters as well in building 13. If that's the case, then I would think that would be a procedural misstep. But generally speaking, the general remand prisoner, where they're like 3/4, at least I hope it's not 3/4 of building 13 or remand. That is really kind of ridiculous. So it's not the same thing. If it is a situation where a lot of the people in building 13 are remand, then a lot of people need to explain themselves better all around. Your idea about having these soldiers guard prisoners out to work, soldiers aren't trained to be guards. There's a difference between a battlefield prisoner and a criminal prisoner. It's a different situation. And the risk in a lot of ways to the civilian population in a civil situation, I don't think it's worth it. The previous caller from Dabity said some police are afraid to squeeze the trigger for fear of repercussions. I would argue that is, at least in some extent, a matter of training. The better training helps in those situations. There are simulators in the States. I don't know if we have money for that, right? Maybe what we need are role players or role-playing scenarios. I saw in one case from military police, there was an active shooter situation. I think it was a military situation. They had someone pretend to be an active shooter. He had a few blanks, you know. The trainees who were responding to this scenario, you know, they basically either fired blanks themselves or declared their shot at the suspect, and a referee or observer basically made the determination, no, you didn't hit him. I guess in part so that the scenario could go on further, they could get more training in, right? And the point is, it was a situation to kind of give them a chance to get a feel for how these things can play out. Part of any sort of confrontation or conflict is the human brain needs some experience so that it could better deal with the situation, process the situation, comprehend the situation quickly and with a significant degree or reasonable degree of certainty so that it could be decisive quickly, make decisive decisions without hesitation and second guessing and taking too long and the moment evolves too fast and it can't keep up. I don't know if we have training for that. That could help. Because a lot of role playing will put you in a simulation without the need for electronic monitors and all of that jazz and sensors and all of that. You don't necessarily need to have a full national training center in Nevada setup. And the thing is, the soldiers also will not necessarily have training. Their rules for engagement in the scenarios they should be training for will not prepare them for this. And make no mistake, for better or worse, if it's foreign combatant prisoners, that's not the same as your civilian population prisoners. But again, what did I say about the whole hospital thing? You don't want the risk of them escaping. The prisoner that escaped was doing labor. He wasn't supposed to be working at the time. He wasn't on that work detail, but he somehow bluffed his way on it and then figured out a way to escape from it. if we had work details outside of the prisons. We can't control them within the prisons. The soldiers, utilizing deadly force, will run into lawsuits. The lawsuits will be based on laws that are there to have a fail-safe to protect all citizens of the country. And this is what a concept people don't seem to understand. You're okay with it because you assume that if anything goes wrong, it will only be gangsters that feel the repercussions of that. And I'm telling you, it's not going to be that way. It's going to be other people as well that's going to feel the consequences of such an excessive idea or policy. Because then if it's the case, we're going to have soldiers with prisoners on remand, and they're going to go on work details to what, cut grass, break rocks, I don't know. And then a prisoner decides, I want to escape. So what do these soldiers do? Maybe they are shoot first, ask question later. Nobody cares, right? He's a prisoner, except he's running down the road. There are houses there. He's not running towards a bush. The bullet goes and hits a woman who peeks out the window. That never happened before, right? And soldiers would not be trained, or they would be far less trained, because most soldiering situations are not supposed to be done within a civilian population. So they're not going to necessarily have the same training, if any at all, about what's in the backfield of my target. So I need to be careful about over-penetration, particularly since I will definitely be given a weapon that will over-penetrate. It will go through plywood. It will go through potentially wooden walls. It will go through one person into the next. It will go through that door if I miss and it hits that building. Yeah, and it's not like that's never happened before, where civilians get killed in those scenarios, except it has. Guarding prisons on work details is not that easy. And usually, to some extent, a work detail is not necessarily a punishment. If we want to act like some hardcore prisons, which arguably were not humane, I'm telling you, eventually some falsely accused is going to be in remand and something bad's going to happen to him, and then we're going to say, how could this happen? Principles, ideals, we prove how important they are to us when it's hard to uphold them. And that's why I, to some extent, am still willing to push back against these desires to be tougher on crime, but tougher in ways that run the risk of negative consequences for non-criminals. It's a hell of a thing in a society. Because if you want to fight fire with fire, what's going to happen? Two things are going to happen. One, you run the risk of eventually becoming the thing that you're trying to defeat. And two, you potentially open the door for extreme measures that then lead to a weakening or destruction of our democracy. And in fact, it won't just be the end of democracy. Democracy will die with thunderous applause as we approve of all of the extra measures that we think we need, because we are unable to figure out how to solve it within the framework of a modern democracy that has a healthy and reasonable understanding of individual rights, even those who are charged and convicted. That's not to say that they have to be treated better than the average citizen. Some rights are taken away. Some rights have to be maintained. It's not about giving them an easy time. I don't understand. I will agree. TV is in prison, electronics in prison, parties in prison, phones in prison, disrespect to the prison service. All of these things have to be dealt with. But we don't need to turn ourselves into El Salvador to do it. Now, the people of El Salvador, they're happy for it. But they're also willing to say, well, if some innocent people get caught up in prison, in a prison situation that's brutal, they don't care. So now here's the question. What if you are the innocent person caught up in a much more open rules of engagement, a much more relaxed procedural or regulatory framework by which you could try and convict somebody, or maybe you don't even convict them at all? What if you are the innocent person that gets caught up in all of that? The innocent person in a prison like the prison in El Salvador, or worse, where you have soldiers who will, if necessarily, treat you harshly to keep you in line while you do hard labor because you were misidentified. That is what the people of El Salvador are willing to sacrifice. They're willing to sacrifice the ideals of a democracy and individual rights for the sake of fighting crime. They're willing to sacrifice individuals at the foot of these crime-fighting measures, some of whom are innocent. I am not necessarily ready for that. That's just taking the problem and transferring it to other people. Now, the murder rate in El Salvador was potentially worse than here. But I'm not willing to sacrifice other innocent civilians so that I could live better. If it was easy, then it wouldn't be a problem. It's not easy. That's why it's so hard and so long to solve. But the real thing is, wanting to do all of these things, tougher on crime or whatever, doesn't speak to the fact that at the end of the day, the legislature is lazy on crime. The legislature is ineffective on crime. The legislature is negligent on crime. Because the criminal law that we have in this country seemingly has a lot of holes. And those holes then leads to weaknesses in the system that causes us to end up with prison officers so afraid for their life they dare not deny prisoners some special meal. Otherwise, they might get shot. Or TV, or internet. Otherwise, they might get shot. They dare not do it because we do not have the ability to prosecute murderers in this country. We don't have the ability to catch murderers to a reasonable extent. It doesn't have to be 100%, but it has to be more than 10 to 20%. That's before conviction. The system depends on all the other parts to be working well. Let's not fall to temptation to say, oh, how do we fix this? Well, let's just do this short-term thing. No, we have to understand the problem stems not just from the prison service and the lack of accountability there, from the executive part of government. It also extends to a lot of the deficiencies throughout the system, one of which is the poor legislature that undermines efforts by the police. Because one of the things that another member of the Prison Service Association said is, you have intelligence, turn it into evidence. Yet, I don't know if he knows this, but the police gets a lot of intelligence about a lot of things and has a very hard time, for whatever reason, they are not able to turn it into evidence because they know who all the gangsters are and it's illegal to be in a gang in this country. And yet, how many convictions have we seen? And what that tells me is, at some point, it can't be that all police officers are that incapable. To not get one? I think one was charged and it's supposed to be in trial. I don't think he's been convicted yet. Not one conviction. Not one gang broken up by police efforts. Busting out army soldiers who are even less trained than police to deal with police type scenarios is not the answer. It might make you feel better if they do it, but I will guarantee you that ain't gonna solve nothing. Unless we want to see more law enforcement killings, and then there'll be a lot, at some point, there will be a backlash to that. They will lose public support for that. That's a whole other kettle of fish. All right. this is going to be probably something that a lot of people will continue to disagree with me, because I understand the very real concern over crime. I have a responsibility. And maybe I'm wrong, but I feel I and the fourth estate, the rest of the fourth estate, or at least some of us, it doesn't have to be all of us, any media, journalists, commentators, analysts, we have the responsibility to push back against excessive force to fight crime, to push back against the desire to just eliminate rights. And again, we're not just talking convicted now. Some people don't even understand. Remand people are not convicted people. There's never been a case of mistaken identity before? Ever? You want to tell me that it will never happen? That the police, whenever they charge someone, they will get it right all the time? That the evidence will always make it clear all of the time? Well, at this point, we'll be lucky if we get arrests, much less convictions, some of the time. And within that, mistakes can be made. So, I would like to see those who see it from my perspective, it's not about protecting the rights of convicted criminals and treating them with kids' gloves, going easy on them. I understand. Listen, certain religious bodies, they preach rehabilitation. They preach turning your life around. So they have to champion that cause. And I'm not necessarily championing that cause. I don't have an issue with the death penalty being reinstated, because if that's the will of the people, that's the will of the people. I'm just saying we need to cross all our T's, dot all our I's, and do it the right way, and not fall into temptation to do it the wrong way. And until we have a criminal justice system that fixes all of its problems, I don't trust them suckers to take prisoners from the prisons to go and do work anywhere outside of the prisons. Because here's the bottom line. Until we fix a lot of the problems, all of that corruption that is probably within the prison service, or all of the threats that cover the prison service, that could be aimed at the soldiers. And to some extent, I don't think the soldiers are man enough to deal with that the right way. They might deal with it the wrong way, and that might be just as bad for the nation that is TNT. Not all people would see that way. I rather would not want to see a war between soldiers and gangsters in our streets. I shudder to think what could happen because of that. Anyway, let's end things there. I want to thank our two callers. I'll just say this, I'll reiterate the last point. The Commissioner of Police, Public Relations are not his strength, but he does understand it, at least to some degree. And I appreciate his efforts on that front. And I also appreciate the fact that his strength lies more in intelligence and operations. And leadership, dare I say, something that was sorely lacking from his predecessor. So I'll agree with Mr. Dabadi on that. It's not great at public relations, but he understands it enough. And to some extent, I don't want a used car salesman as Commissioner of Police. That would be kind of bad. So maybe it's a good thing he doesn't understand public relations to a great extent. You know, that shouldn't be his priority. We hold out hope that we'll see a permanent turnaround and an improvement in the trends of crime statistics moving forward. Things are looking better this year than last year, but it's not enough to declare victory yet. With that said, hopefully the ASP will be with me tomorrow. Until then, have a good day. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Never forget, it's nice to be nice, even to the people on remand, and even to the convicted criminals. There's a difference between nice and stern and strict and harsh. You can be nice and still sternly enforce the correct boundaries. And then If they still want to slap you, you could say, you did your part. That's what I always say when you think about it. With that said, we will see each other tomorrow. I have faith. Goodbye.
WESN.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
Hi, I'm Claudette, radiographer at the radiology departments at the community hospital. We offer high-quality service with state-of-the-art equipment in X-ray, ultrasound,